Welcome back to Untold Revenge Files. Today, the story you're about to hear takes place in Crestwood, California. My name is Megan Cole. I'm 32 years old, and I spent the first 26 years of my life believing that love meant letting the people closest to you shrink you down to a size that made them comfortable. I want to tell you about the night my sister stood in front of 300 people and told them I would die alone. And I want to tell you why she had no idea she was speaking to the wife of the man she needed most. But first, you need to understand how I got to that room, standing in a corner, holding a glass of champagne I hadn't sipped, wearing a dress my mother told me was too plain, smiling at a crowd that had already decided I was the family's cautionary tale. Growing up in Crestwood, my older sister Vanessa was the sun, and I was expected to orbit. She was 3 years older, louder, shinier, and endlessly confident. Vanessa was the one who got the lead in every school play, the one who walked into a room and rearranged the gravity. And she was beautiful, everyone said so. Often right in front of me, as if I couldn't hear, as if comparing us was just stating weather. My parents, David and Lorraine Cole, weren't cruel people, but they were careless in the way that parents sometimes are when one child dazzles and the other simply endures. Vanessa got praised for charm. I got praised for being no trouble. She got the convertible at 16. I got told that a used sedan builds character. She studied marketing at a private university, and I clawed my way through a state school on scholarships, studying computer science, a field my mother once called so isolating. When Vanessa landed a junior position at a consulting firm in San Francisco, the family threw a dinner. When I was recruited straight out of grad school into a cybersecurity role at one of the fastest-growing tech firms on the West Coast, my father said, "That's nice, Meggie, but don't forget to have a life, too." A life. As if building something with my mind and my hands wasn't one. The years stacked up like bricks in a wall between us. Vanessa rose through consulting. I rose through engineering and operations, but only her climb was celebrated. My promotions were met with, "But are you happy?" My salary was never asked about. My apartment was called small but cozy by a mother who'd never visited it. And my relationship status, single as far as they knew, became the family's favorite quiet tragedy. "You know," my mother said at Thanksgiving 2 years ago, "Vanessa's boyfriend is a partner at his firm. Maybe she could introduce you to someone." I smiled. I always smiled. Because the truth was a grenade I wasn't ready to throw. Before I tell you exactly what Vanessa did next, tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I'm really curious to see how far this story will travel, now. The engagement party. Vanessa had gotten engaged to a man named Preston Howard, a real estate developer with inherited money and a jawline sharper than his personality. The engagement party was held at the Whitmore Estate, a private venue in Napa County. 300 guests. A jazz quartet tucked into a corner beneath crystal chandeliers. White roses cascading from every surface like waterfalls frozen mid-fall. It was the kind of event that whispered money in every direction. I arrived alone. Deliberately. I wore a simple navy dress. I kept my makeup light. I didn't need to perform for this crowd, and I wasn't going to. For the first 2 hours, I was invisible. And honestly, I preferred it. I stood near the bar, watching Vanessa glide through the room like a woman who'd been rehearsing for this night her entire life. She kissed cheeks, laughed on cue, posed for photos. She was radiant, and I don't say that with bitterness. She was. But then she stepped up to the microphone, and everything changed. "I want to thank everyone for being here," she began, her voice warm, practiced. "Especially my family. My incredible parents who taught me that love is worth waiting for." Applause. "And my little sister Megan." She paused, scanning the room until she found me in the corner. She smiled, the kind of smile that looks like kindness but tastes like a knife. Megan, who is still on her own little journey. We keep telling her that someone special is out there, but... She tilted her head. "Let's all just keep sending good thoughts, okay? Some of us bloom a little later." The room laughed softly. A few people clapped with that gentle, pitying rhythm that says, "Oh, poor thing." My chest tightened, my throat constricted. My fingers gripped the champagne flute so hard I thought the stem might snap. 300 people, colleagues, friends, strangers, looking at me like I was a stray someone had reluctantly let inside. And Vanessa? Vanessa watched my face and smiled wider. She didn't know that the ring on my left hand was tucked inside my clutch. She didn't know that the quiet, difficult sister she'd just humiliated had been married for 4 years. And she certainly didn't know that my husband, James Park, the billionaire CEO of Meridian Ventures, was the exact man she had been pitching a $4.2 million consulting deal to for the past 3 months. I had no idea that one text message sent from that very room would change everything for both of us. I stood in that ballroom for another 45 minutes after Vanessa's speech. I smiled. I nodded. I accepted the sympathetic shoulder touches from distant aunts who whispered things like, "Don't worry, sweetie, your time will come." I let them believe what they wanted. I had been letting them believe it for years. The drive home was silent. No music, no podcast, just the hum of the highway and the ringing echo of my sister's voice. Some of us bloom a little later. When I pulled into the driveway of our home, a 4-bedroom Victorian in Pacific Heights that James and I had renovated together, I sat in the car for a long time. The porch lights were on. James had left them on for me, the way he always did. I want you to understand something. I didn't hide my marriage because I was ashamed. I hid it because I knew my family. I knew that the moment they found out about James, about who he was, what he'd built, Vanessa would find a way to make it about her. My parents would suddenly become interested in visiting. My mother would tell her friends about Megan's husband, the CEO. And none of it would be about me. It would be about proximity to status. James understood. He was the one who suggested we keep it quiet until I was ready. "Your family, your timeline," he said on our wedding night, a private ceremony on the coast of Maine with 12 people, none of them named Cole. But that night, sitting in my car, I wasn't thinking about timelines. I was thinking about the look on Vanessa's face when she said my name into that microphone, the practiced tilt of her head, the rehearsed sympathy. She hadn't stumbled into cruelty, she had choreographed it. And here's what burned most. Vanessa's consulting firm, Praxis Strategy Group, had been courting Meridian Ventures for months. A $4.2 million engagement to restructure their client acquisition pipeline. Vanessa had personally led every pitch meeting, every slide deck, every follow-up email. She had bragged about it at family dinners, how she was this close to landing the biggest deal of her career. She didn't know that every proposal she submitted crossed my husband's desk. She didn't know that James had mentioned casually one evening over dinner, "A woman named Vanessa Cole pitched us again today. Sharp presenter, aggressive closer. Any relation?" I had laughed. "My sister." He raised an eyebrow. "Small world?" "Smaller than you think." I hadn't interfered. I told James to evaluate the proposal on its merits. I wanted no part of it. Business was business. But that night, after the speech, after the laughter, after the pitying applause, I picked up my phone. I stared at the screen for a full minute. My thumbs hovered. Then I typed, "James, the Praxis deal. Kill it. Permanently." 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Then, "You sure?" "Yes." A pause. Then, "Done. I love you. Come inside. It's cold." I exhaled. My hands were shaking, not from anger, but from the weight of a door I had just closed and could never reopen. The next morning, I called my best friend, Natalie Okafor. Natalie was a family therapist with a private practice in Berkeley, and she had been the one steady voice in my life for the past decade. She picked up on the second ring. "What happened?" I told her everything, the speech, the laughter, the text. There was a long silence. Then Natalie said, "Megan, can I ask you something? If a coworker stood up at a company event and publicly called you unlovable in front of 300 people, would you go back to work there?" "Of course not." "Then why do you keep showing up to that family like it's a job you can't quit?" I didn't answer, because the answer terrified me. I kept showing up because some part of me, the little sister who once idolized Vanessa, who wanted to sit at the grown-up table, who craved her mother's attention, still believed that if I was just good enough, quiet enough, patient enough, they would finally see me. But they didn't want to see me. They wanted me to stay small so Vanessa could stay tall. Natalie spoke gently. You already know your answer. You've known it for years. You just didn't have permission to say it out loud. That afternoon, I did something I had never done before. I sat at my desk, the desk where I managed a $53 million infrastructure budget as CTO of a company with over 600 employees, and I wrote a letter. Not to send, just to see. Dear Vanessa, it began. You told 300 people I would never find anyone. You should know that the man you've been pitching your career-defining deal to sleeps next to me every night. But this letter isn't about him. It's about the fact that you needed me to be less so you could feel like enough. I didn't send it. I saved it in a folder called Clarity. The next morning, I woke with swollen eyes but a settled stomach. For the first time in years, something inside me had shifted. Not rage, not sadness. Just a quiet, immovable certainty. I was done performing smallness for people who mistook it for truth. It was time to stop hiding. 3 weeks passed. I know this because Vanessa called me exactly 21 days after her engagement party, not to apologize, but to vent. You will not believe what happened, she said, her voice tight, almost shaking. Meridian Ventures killed the deal, completely. The CEO personally declined it. 4 months of work, Megan. 4 months. Preston thinks it's political. My managing director is furious. They won't even take a follow-up meeting. I listened. I said, I'm sorry to hear that. It's like someone sabotaged me from the inside, she continued. The proposal was flawless. Everyone said so. I could have told her right then, but I wasn't ready. Not because I was scared, because I wanted her to sit with the loss the way I had sat with years of hers. Have you ever watched someone describe their own karma without realizing what they were holding? That's what it felt like. Vanessa was holding the consequence of every belittling comment, every public jab, every pitying glance she had trained our family to give me, and she had no idea it was shaped like a mirror. Over the next 2 months, the ripples widened. Vanessa's position at Praxis suffered. The Meridian deal had been her flagship pitch, the one she'd leveraged for a promotion. Without it, the promotion evaporated. Her managing director reassigned her to smaller accounts. She started working later, drinking more, snapping at Preston. The golden sister was tarnishing, and the family noticed. Meanwhile, my life continued the way it had been continuing for years, just without the mask. I was managing a platform migration at work that would serve 11 million users. James and I were renovating a second property we'd purchased in Carmel. I had started mentoring young women in STEM through a nonprofit I co-founded with 2 colleagues. My world was full. It had always been full. The only thing that had ever been empty was my family's understanding of it. It was my mother who cracked first. She called on a Saturday morning. Maggie, I've been thinking. We don't talk enough. I feel like I don't even know what's going on in your life. You're right, I said. You don't. Silence. What does that mean? It means exactly what it sounds like, Mom. She didn't push, but I could hear something unfamiliar in her voice. Uncertainty. Lorraine Cole was not a woman accustomed to uncertainty. The full revelation came 5 weeks later at a family brunch my parents hosted. I attended with a decision already made. No more hiding. I wore my ring. My mother noticed first. Her eyes dropped to my left hand as I reached for the orange juice, and her fork stopped mid-air. Megan, what is that? My wedding ring. The table went silent. My father put down his coffee. Vanessa stared. You're married? My mother whispered. For 4 years. To whom? My father's voice was careful, almost fragile. His name is James Park. He's the CEO of Meridian Ventures. I will never forget the sound that came from Vanessa. It wasn't a gasp. It wasn't a word. It was the sound of understanding arriving all at once, like a window breaking in slow motion. Her face went white. Her lips parted. And then she said the only thing she could say. No. Yes, I said calmly. The deal your firm pitched, the one the CEO personally declined, that was my husband, and I asked him to walk away from it. You sabotaged me. Her voice cracked. No, I set a boundary. I told James to evaluate your proposal on its merits for months. He was going to approve it. But after your engagement party, after you stood in front of 300 people and announced that I would die alone, I decided that I would no longer allow my life to subsidize yours, not even indirectly. That was a joke, Megan. It was a choice, Vanessa. And so was mine. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who benefits from keeping you invisible, tell me in the comments, what was the moment you finally said enough? My mother started crying. My father sat very still, staring at his plate like it held instructions he couldn't read. Vanessa pushed back from the table and left without another word. Knowing the deal was gone and the truth was out should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like surgery, painful, precise, and absolutely necessary. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. And for the first time, I wondered whether freedom and loneliness would feel the same. 6 months passed before Vanessa contacted me again. In that time, a great deal shifted beneath the surface of our family. My mother called every 2 weeks. Awkward, stilted conversations at first, filled with long pauses and questions she didn't know how to ask, but slowly she began to listen. Not to respond, not to fix, just to hear. She told me once quietly, I think I spent so long worrying about Vanessa's shine that I forgot to look at your light. That's on me, Meggie. That's on me. My father wrote me a letter. Handwritten. 4 pages. He talked about his own father, a man who had favored his older brother, who had never once attended his baseball games, who had died without saying he was proud. I became the thing I hated, he wrote, and I didn't even see it until you showed me. I read that letter 3 times. I cried each time. Then I put it in the same folder where I kept the unsent letter to Vanessa. I renamed the folder Healing. James met my parents over dinner in the city. It was tense, but genuine. My father shook his hand for a long time. My mother brought homemade pie and apologized 4 times before the appetizers arrived. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and real was more than I'd had in years. Vanessa's silence during those months was loud. Through my mother, I learned fragments. She and Preston had postponed the wedding. She had been passed over for another promotion. She had started seeing a therapist, not performatively, not to check a box, but because something inside her had finally cracked open wide enough to look through. When she finally reached out, it was a text. Simple. No drama. Can we talk? Not to fight. I just need to say some things. You don't have to respond to any of it. I sat with that message for 2 days. I talked to Natalie about it. I talked to James. I even talked to myself, standing in front of the bathroom mirror like a woman rehearsing for a role she didn't want but couldn't refuse. You don't owe her anything, Natalie said. I know, I replied, but I owe myself the chance to hear it. We met at a cafe in Sausalito. Neutral ground. She was already there when I arrived. No makeup, hair pulled back, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. Somewhere deeper than that. Thank you for coming, she said. I sat down. I didn't speak. And then Vanessa did something I had never seen her do in 35 years of life. She told the truth without an audience. I've been jealous of you since we were kids, she said. Her voice was steady but thin, like a wire pulled taut. You were smarter than me. You were more self-sufficient. You didn't need people the way I needed people. And instead of admiring that, I made it your flaw. I told myself, and everyone who would listen, that your independence was loneliness, that your quiet was emptiness, that your success didn't count because it wasn't visible the way mine was. She paused. Her eyes were wet. The speech at my engagement party wasn't a joke. It was a performance. I needed the room to see you the way I needed to see you, as less than me, because if you were whole, then what was I? I let the words land. I let them breathe. Vanessa, I said slowly. I didn't hide my marriage to punish you. I hid it to protect something beautiful from a family that had made a habit of measuring love with a scoreboard. I hid it because I was terrified that the one thing in my life that was fully mine would become about you. And I need you to hear this. Killing the deal wasn't sabotage. It was the first time in my life I chose myself over your comfort. She nodded. She didn't argue. She didn't deflect. She just nodded. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said. My therapist says forgiveness is a process, not a transaction. I'm asking if there's a version of the future where we're not strangers. I looked at her. My older sister. The girl who used to braid my hair before school. The teenager who once drove 40 minutes in a rainstorm to pick me up from a party where I felt unsafe. The woman who, somewhere along the way, decided that love was a competition and winning meant making sure I lost. I hope you find what you're looking for, Vanessa, I said. I really do. But I'm not able to go back to being the version of myself that made you comfortable. If we rebuild this, it has to be with the real me. All of me. The CTO, the wife, the woman who doesn't need your approval to know she's enough. I know, she whispered. Then we start there. We didn't hug. We didn't cry into each other's arms like a movie. She finished her coffee. I ordered tea. We talked, carefully, cautiously, about small things, the weather, a book she was reading, a restaurant I liked. It was thin, it was fragile, but it was honest, and honest was a foundation I could stand on. Walking back to my car, I called James. How'd it go? He asked. It went like a beginning, I said, not an ending. That night, I stood on our balcony overlooking the bay. The fog was rolling in the way it always does in Northern California, soft, patient, inevitable. I thought about the girl who stood in the corner of a ballroom holding champagne she never drank, smiling at a room that pitied her. I thought about the woman who typed a text that toppled a deal. And I thought about the person I was now, someone who understood that the most powerful thing you can do isn't prove people wrong. It's stop needing them to see you at all. Vanessa still has our parents. She has Preston, her career, her therapist, her own journey. I didn't take everything from her. I just stopped letting her take everything from me. So after everything you've heard, if you were standing where I am now, with a sister who spent years building her confidence by dismantling yours, and she finally asks for a second chance, would you open the door and call it forgiveness, or would you protect your peace and call it wisdom? I chose both. Carefully, slowly, on my terms. Because the lesson I learned wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about deals or money or the look on someone's face when the truth finally catches them. The lesson was this: never let people define your worth, especially when they benefit from underestimating you. Your silence is not weakness, your patience is not permission, and your value does not decrease because someone refuses to see it. I'm Megan Cole. I'm 32. I'm a CTO, a wife, a mentor, and a woman who finally stopped shrinking, and I've never stood taller. And that's where Megan's story ends. Not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with something most people never get from the ones who hurt them: the truth. Now I want to hear from you, if your own sister, someone who was supposed to protect you, someone who was supposed to be your first best friend, stood in front of 300 people and told them you'd never be loved, and then, months later, sat across from you in a cafe asking for a second chance. Would you open that door, or would you protect the peace you fought so hard to build? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story hit close to home, if you've ever been the one standing in the corner while someone else used your silence as permission to shrink you, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Not for me. For every quiet person out there who's been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love them the loudest. If you're new here, subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss a story. Because next time, the story gets even deeper. A mother called her daughter worthless for 20 years, then showed up at her door begging for a place to live. You don't want to miss what happened next. Until then, protect your peace, know your worth, and never, ever let someone else write your story. This has been Untold Revenge Files. I'll see you in the next one.